Today we'd like to finish up on the east side of the 900 block of military. And we're going to look at this group of buildings right here. It almost appears to be four separate buildings here because of the different colorings for each business. But if you look at this inset picture here, you can see that the original building was all one color brick. It was just one building with probably 3 or 4 different businesses in it. And when I say one color brick, I assume that because of that one shade of gray going all the way across, that it's one shade of brick. Because obviously it's not in color. This early photograph here has been labeled across from the Harrington Hotel. Of course, this photo here was taken before the Harrington Hotel was built. They didn't build the hotel until 1896, and this photo here was taken between 1860 and 1870. I don't agree with the caption of the location of this photo. I believe it was taken elsewhere. I believe it was taken in the area that we've been looking at in the 900 block of military on the east side. Pay close attention to the architecture here. If you look at the windows, they're all inset with those panels. There's like 5 large ones and then that one small one in the middle with just one window in it. There's 3 windows on the 2 insets on the right. There's the one window and the next one to the left, and that goes over the door that goes upstairs, just like it does today. And then there's 3 more insets, but those only have 2 windows each. And then if you look at the building to the left of it, you see the same horseshoe design, double horseshoe really, design as the building that we were looking at today. Then if you go to the right where the 3-story buildings are, this is where standard office supply would be today. Of course, the facade today covers up what the buildings look like. Here's a postcard showing what it looked like across the street from the Harrington after the Harrington was built. I don't see any of those buildings that were there or should have been there. Now let's take a look at what I believe is the same location today. You have the 5 insets. You have the first 2 insets from the south with 3 windows each. The one inset in the middle with the one window and the door below it. That's for the stairs going up to the 2nd floor. And then the next 3 insets, which have only 2 windows in each one. And then, of course, the building to the left of it, having the double horseshoe near the top of the building. And, of course, the 3-story building to the right of it, which is now standard office supply. So that's my opinion. And what do you think? I could be wrong. We've already looked at the first business on the north end of the building in our last video. So let's go to this next building right here. This is what it looks like today. But when I was growing up, there was a fruit and vegetable store here. It was run by Dominic Grazietti. And they had the fruits and vegetables, of course, and then later on they expanded and they carried candies, cigars, tobacco, as this sign here shows. And if you recall from a previous video that we made, Grazietti also had a building where Diana Suisse was. He owned that building along with Joseph Casello. And you can still see the names at the top of the building today. Casello and Grazietti. This building, more specifically this office on the 2nd floor, has some bearing on this next video that you're going to look at. The music you've been listening to is called Bag of Rags. Composer of Bag of Rags was William McCandless, as he composed this as well as several other pieces for the Keystone Cops. He was a musician that was well known in the Port Huron area, especially for his ragtime music. And in the early 1900s, you could find him playing regularly at the Pine Grove Pavilion, and also for dinner music at the Windermere Hotel. So what does all that have to do with this building here? Well, actually, right here was where William McCandless had his publishing office, a fact that I didn't realize until just today. And since we've already covered Huron Avenue in a previous video, I thought I'd throw it in today for free of charge. Crazy Eddie's was there for years. It goes all the way back to the early 1900s. And before that, there was a grocery store there that went back to the 1800s. And as we zoom in on this photograph here, we can make out the grocery sign that was out in front of the store. And you can see it right here. Alright, let's take one step south to the next business, which is Carl's Barber Shop. In the 60s, Ed Latham had a barber shop there. In the 50s, it was vacant quite a bit of time in the 50s. I know in the 40s, Central Locksmith had a shop there, and they also sold stamps and coins. So they had a little bit of business, two businesses going there. In the early 1900s, this location housed Western Union. Of course, Western Union back then wasn't the monopoly it later became. There was many companies competing with Western Union, and one of those companies was Postal Telegraph Company. It later took over for Western Union at the same location in the 30s and probably into the early 40s. Postal Telegraph Company was originally formed in 1881 to compete with Western Union. The Postal Telegraph Company capitalized on the email technology of its day. Telegrams were sent to destination offices and then mailed to private and business recipients. And they even had their own stamp when they mailed these telegrams to the folks. Using local mail delivery still made possible to transfer messages much faster than long-distance mail. Keep in mind that mail between the states back then, states in the same region even, could take up to 20 days. If you lived in Yale or one of the outlying towns, telegraph didn't do you much good, especially with the telephone system or lack of it that they had back then. They couldn't just call you and tell you had a telegram waiting for them. And that's why this company was quite a success during the time. But they weren't quite successful enough. Western Union kept absorbing these smaller telegraph companies, and finally they absorbed this postal telegraph as well. In the year 1900, this address was occupied by the Port Huron Republican newspaper. Kind of ironic that back then there was 11 newspapers being produced in the city, and today, 2013, we don't have any newspapers being published in the city. I mean, we have the Times Herald building, but my understanding is they publish it somewhere else. And it's no secret that the media today and back then as well slanted the news to whatever their political leaning was. But in this later city directory, you can see which way these papers are leaning. The Port Huron Commercial, in the parentheses right at the beginning, says Dem for Democrat, and the Port Huron Times says Rep for Republican. Nothing like having it out in the open. And of course, I don't think there was any mystery to the Port Huron Republican newspaper and which way it leaned that was published in this building. Alright, let's take another step south and go right here. Today you can see that USA uniform is here. And if you recall, in the 209 Google photo, it was a few doors north, and so they must have moved down here over that period of time. But the store I remember growing up was Quinlan Music Store. They sold musical instruments, pianos, organs, gave music lessons. And that was there for a long time, probably over 30 years. Don't have a real good picture of it, but we've got a couple pictures here where you can see the signage. Here's the first one. this very wintry day, if you look in the background, it's a little blurry, but that's the Quinlan sign right here. As we look at the north end of this building, this part right here, we can see that these inserts are clean, the windows are pretty even and pretty much the same. And it looks like that has been that way for throughout the years, as you can see from this original photo here. The only variance in this photo is that one of these inserts has an awning on it. But the very far insert, this one there, at some point in between the first photo I showed you and this one, someone in one of the offices upstairs decided they wanted a better view, and so they put a bay window in that section right there, which you can see in this photo right here. You can see it sticking out there on the very southern portion of the building. And here's a little better view looking at it from the opposite direction. This portion of the building has been several things over the year, mainly a barber and beauty shop. 50s and 60s it was Latham Barber and Beauty Shop, and then in the 40s it was Sam and Ed's Barber and Beauty Shop, and before that it was a clothing store and a shoe store and various stores in there. Alright, going down one door south, we come to Standard Office Supply. Of course, Standard Office Supply has been there for a lot of years, or I think it goes all the way back into the late 30s. But this facade that you see here covers up some very unique type of buildings, especially the one here that we're looking at, the one on the south end with the ornate roof line. And also you can see that there's two of these buildings have bay windows protruding from them. The one on the south end particularly goes out a ways. Probably gave a pretty good view. And I imagine both of those bay windows had to be removed to put that facade on. Standard Office Supply wasn't always as large as it is today. In this photo here, you can see as we zoom in that the building that has the large bay window there wasn't part of Standard Office Supply as it is today. And in this photo here, we can see what it looked like before the facade was put on. You can see the signage down there, Standard Office Supply. And you can also see that the building next to it was some type of a restaurant. You can see the Coca-Cola sign out front. This postcard gives us another view of those buildings. And you can see the ornate roof line there stands out very distinctly. You can also see at one time there was a grocery store here from the signage. A pretty good look at that bay window as well. In this postcard here, we got a little different view. And of course, we can see the roof line, but we also see that it has a little different signage for the groceries. In this postcard here, we can see there's some type of celebration going on. The streets are lined with people, and the flags are out. It gives you a look at the buildings we've been looking at, and it gives you a good look at that particular time period. Moving one door south, we come to the last of the three-story buildings where the Raven Cafe is now located at. Checking their website, this is what it says about the building. It says the Raven is located in a Civil War era building, one of the oldest structures in the area, and has been completely restored, including an interior decor and atmosphere entirely unique and stimulating to provide you with unforgettable experiences that will bring you back. And like we said earlier, there were several restaurants at this location. But what I remember being here when I was growing up was WHLS radio station. WHLS started up in 1938, and for a time it was the principal top 40 music station in the Port Huron Blue Water area, as well as the very first radio station serving St. Clair County. The station was founded by the late John Wismer and H.L. Stevens. You can see the signage here in the front of the building. You can't see it very well, but it says WHLS. And of course you can read it kind of faded out on the side of the building, but you can read it a little better, WHLS. And then it gives the location on the dial. And although this picture isn't as clear as the previous one, you can make out the signage a little better on the front of the building where it says WHLS. Here we have some of their staff doing live on air, going over their scripts here and sitting down being comfortable. This photograph represents WHLS on the air. It's believed to be a live broadcast from the Desmond Theater in the early 1940s. During the war years, the station presented such programs to promote war bond sales or just to raise funds for the USO and Red Cross. The Blue Water Bridge was dedicated in October 1938. The local radio station, WHLS, covered this event in its very first broadcast. Flanked by members of the Royal Canadian Mounted Police, the Times Herald publisher Louis Wheel speaks over the air. Today the buildings just south of the old WHLS building look like this. This building has had several restaurants in it over the years. One here you can see in this photograph. But at one time, there was something else here, the infamous Satan's Bookstore. But that didn't last too long there. And then we come to the end of the block with this building right here. I think this is a very unusual building for this block. It just doesn't look like it belongs because of the different architecture. In the 60s and 50s, there was an optometrist here by the name of Clarence Yeager. Then in the 40s and 30s, there was Checker Cab. Also, they changed names over the years, different cab companies, but also was AAA, as you can see from this photograph right here. And if you look closely, you can see this is where the USO was. So you can see the little sign just to the right of the AAA sign. Well, that completes the east side of the 900 block of Military Street. In our next video, we'll see what there is to see in the next block.